African Union became a member of G20. The way UPSC keeps on asking question, that's why this particular diagram is also very important. What is the principle of Troika? Past president, there is the present president, and then there is a future president. The philosophy that was this particular summit based upon was the philosophy of Ubuntu. And recent US boycott that also sends the message that all is not good with this particular organization, and still this organization lacks the support of all the powers equally. Hello everyone, I am Vishal Sir, and today we are going to discuss a very important article from the perspective of the UPSC examination, which is regarding the recent G20 summit. Now this particular G20 summit that had held on 22nd and 23rd of November 2025, that is very important, and the reason for this is for the first time that the G20 summit was held in African continent. In 2023, when India hosted this particular summit, we had seen that the African Union became a member of G20. So that's how this particular series of events where the global south is getting more priority as far as the G20 as a forum is concerned, that is a redefining movement as far as the global diplomacy is concerned. Now, talking about the G20, there has to be certain basics that we should be having an idea apart from the evolution of the G20 as an organization. So what you are able to see on your screen, these are the current membership of the G20 group. So in this particular membership, it has been divided in such a manner that will be able to give you an idea regarding the contrast. So the smaller one that you are able to see is representing the G7 countries. Now in these particular G7 countries, it includes the France, Canada, Italy, Japan, Germany, USA, and the United Kingdom. So this particular close group reflects the Western countries or the countries which are industrially developed countries. These are representing the major economies that developed after the World War II. And these countries shaped mainly the world order post World War II. And in that also specifically there are certain countries which were later became part of this particular grouping, and the grouping was termed as G20. But the G7 is still existing as far as a separate grouping is concerned, which is focusing upon the geopolitics. Iske alawa, once there was inclusion of the Russia in the late 90s, there was this group that expanded, G7 was expanded into G8. But after the Russian annexation of Crimea, there was sanctions on this particular country and it was removed, and again the grouping became G7. But the larger subset or the larger set that you are able to see in this particular picture is reflecting the countries of G20, which is also including, apart from these 8 countries, it is including now the African Union since 2023. Other than that, there is Argentina, Australia, Brazil. Then there is China, European Union, India, Indonesia, Mexico, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, South Korea, and Turkey. Now see, the way UPSC keeps on asking question, that's why this particular diagram is also very important, because sometimes they ask that which of the following G7 members are member of G20, then that's why this particular diagram. Which of the member of G8 member of G20? This is the diagram. Which are the regional organizations which are member of G20? African Union and the European Union are 2 specific regional organizations which are member of this. Other than that, which are the countries from Asia which are member of G20? So basically you have to understand the psyche of the examination, and that's why this particular topic, and in this manner, understanding of the things is very important to decode those things from the examination perspective. Now see, regarding G20, sometime it is also known as the organization which evolved through the crisis. For example, in 1997, 1998, there was Asian financial crisis that was going on, and at that point of time in 1999, the countries of Asia and along with that certain other developed countries, so certain countries from Asia, certain other countries, they came together and their finance minister and the central bank governors, because the crisis was of economic nature. That's why the initial focus was put towards the financial related collaboration regarding the monetary policies, regarding the fiscal policies, regarding the entire network of economic aspects that was focusing upon in G20, and that's how this particular organization came into inception. And then 1999 onwards, this organization is functioning. Now, the major breakthrough emerged as far as this organization is concerned, emerged in 2007 when there was global financial crisis that started emerging. So the time period of 2007 and 2008 was the defining moment where this particular grouping also had seen and thought to expand its collaboration for including a lot of other geopolitical aspects. So the organization, which was previously the organization based upon the finance ministers and the central governance or the central bank governors, that particular organization also involved the head of the states and the head of the government, and hence this particular organization ka scope also got expanded, and the importance of this particular organization as far as the global politics is concerned has also increased. So since 2008, this particular organization is expanded to include the head of the state and the head of the government, means the highest level delegation from the country is now visiting generally in the G20 summit, and in the recent summit it was being represented by the Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi. Last in this is the expanded in 2023, because see, one such theme that has been emphasized these days in the G20 is regarding the representation from the global south. And in one such previous video where we were discussing about the India and Africa relations, and that is also available on the YouTube, we have talked about the importance of the global south countries. And in this particular type of importance, now in 2023, when this grouping is included the African Union, that became a major milestone event as far as the expansion of the G20 is concerned. And in the G20 expansion in 2023, African Union became a permanent member, making it as a second prominent organization that became member of the G20. Now this is about the evolution, because whenever there may be a question, the evolution related things you can basically talk about as far as this particular examination is concerned. Now, having discussed about the evolution, there may be certain other details which are very, very important yet basic from this particular organization perspective. So this organization does not have any specific formal charter or any specific secretariat. Then how the things are functioning, how this organization is able to hold the meetings at different countries or the member countries annually. So there is annual summit which is based upon the rotating presidency. So that means this particular year it was being hosted by South Africa, next year certain other country which is United States that is going to host. Previously it was Brazil, uske pehle it was India, uske pehle it was Indonesia. So like this there is a rotating presidency. Now rotating presidency generally is there with different other organs, but how it is different? So this is based upon the principle of Troika. What is the principle of Troika? That means there is a past president, there is the present president, and then there is a future president. So for example, this particular summit, it was being hosted by South Africa in the city of Johannesburg. So the previous president was Brazil, this president was South Africa, and next president is the United States. So these are forming the governing mechanism of this particular body, so that at least for 3 years there can be continuity, and this continuity will be passed to the subsequent countries, right? So that's how it is important to understand the concept of Troika, which is including the previous, current, and the incoming presidency. Further, whenever you have to emphasize upon any specific grouping, that importance is being reflected only when you are going to talk about some data. So it is representing more than 85% of the global GDP and 75% of the global trade. Now this is a body representing roughly 19 countries and 2 other organizations, which is reflecting roughly 85% of global GDP. That means it's self-reflection of the importance of G20 as one of the prominent organizations. 75% of the global trade, even majority of the population of the globe is being represented in the G20. So these are certain important details. Now, talking about the recent summit, generally UPSC keeps on asking question about certain important summit. For example, previously when there was BIMSTEC, that was there in news. Last year they had asked the question about that in 2025. Even regarding the BRICS, they had asked the question. So that's how they asked the question about certain important detail. So now, talking about this summit, how it was one of the major and the significant summit, because 2022 it was Indonesia, then 23 India, 24 Brazil, 25 South Africa. All of them are reflecting the countries of the global south and the countries from the developing nation, which is representing their leadership capabilities. So it is a reflection of the countries from the middle income countries which are highlighting their predominance at the global stage. Talking about the forums initiatives or forums focus, now this particular forums focus, which was previously regarding the firefighting or the crisis management, 1999 mein it was for the Asian financial crisis, 2008 mein it was for the basically global financial crisis. So it was mainly focusing upon the crisis management, that the situation should be improved. But now what is the focus? To address the inequities in the society, global financial architecture. It means even talking about the multipolar global order, reform in the multilateral institutions, which is the basic need of the present time. Now, all these things are generally being reflected in the theme that this particular organization is having. And that's why the theme of this organization for this year is solidarity, equality, and the sustainability. Solidarity means reaffirming the solidarity to different sections, even different countries. Disparities are there, but the solidarities has to be mentioned. Then equality, that means treating all equal, do not discriminate between the countries, and even supporting certain countries which deserve their due place. Lastly is the sustainability, because whether you talk about the green energy, whether you talk about the critical mineral, sustainability is one such thing which is very important. Further, having discussed about this particular summit, since it was the first summit of Africa, specifically hosted by South Africa, the philosophy that was this particular summit based upon was the philosophy of Ubuntu. What is this particular philosophy? This philosophy says that there is a interconnectedness in this particular globe. So it's like, it's not about only individual, it's about the entire community, it's about the solidarity. So the African philosophy of Ubuntu basically highlights this particular principle of collectiveness, collective consciousness, right? Now, further, this summit also highlighted that now the world ka focus is shifting from aid to Africa. That means the world was previously seeing Africa as the dark continent, jahan par it was considered that the country needs the aid, the country needs the financial solutions only. But now the country is ready to do the partnership. Country and the continent is basically have a collaboration with different countries. In the articles that where we have discussed regarding the India and Africa partnership, there we have discussed that the importance that African continent right now plays, whether it is demography, whether it is critical mineral, or whether it is any other type of participation. So that Africa deserves its due place right now. Now, finally, one of the very interesting fact about this particular summit, that the summit was boycotted by United States, and the President of United States of America have not participated. The argument that has been provided in order to not taking participation in this summit, that there has been a discrimination against the whites minority in South Africa that is going on, and the government is curtailing their property rights, government is not providing them the due rights, which has been opposed by the South African government. And in retaliation, what the president has done, president has said, next year we are going to host the summit and we are not inviting you. So that shows that there are also not everything good with respect to this organization. There are certain fissures and the fractures that are emerging as far as G20 is also concerned. So these are the basic about this particular summit jo ki nikal kar aaya. Now, what are the key outcomes and the global commitments that were part of this particular summit? And this is very important, because regarding this, either prelims or the mains based question can be asked. Now, what are the key outcomes of this summit? The first important thing is the early including the particular strategy or the early consensus strategy of this particular summit. Now, what is the early consensus strategy? So basically there were whatever contentious issues were, uski jagah par the important issues of the global level where the countries can agree upon those things that were being highlighted. And that's why this particular plan of the Johannesburg summit or that declaration was laid out, and this particular declaration was also agreed by all the countries, not opposed by anyone. So the priorities such as sustainable development, the global equity, and the multilateral reform were agreed upon by all the member countries in this. So the early consensus strategy have yielded its dividend in Johannesburg. Next is regarding the Mission 300. Now these type of questions UPSC can ask, that Mission 300 recently was there in news. So it is basically a joint initiative of the World Bank and the African Development Bank, aiming to connect roughly 300 million population in the sub-Saharan African region. So sub-Saharan African region, jahan par there are a lot of military coup, a lot of other instability related things that are going on, to connect that with the electricity. So jo energy deprivation ya electricity deprivation hai with respect to Africa, that has to be curtailed. And here there will be a need for mobilization of the private funding as well as the public funding. So the majority of the funding has to be accumulated through the private sector participation, and here the funds can be mobilized. Next is regarding the climate finance and the development. So the summit has also recognized that there is an urgent need in order to overcome the gaps that are pertaining with respect to the Paris climate deal. And in order to overcome that, we will need the funding gap ko close karna. And in order to close that particular funding gap, there is a need for mobilizing more and more funding. And in order to utilize that, it has been recognized that need to mobilize roughly $1.3 trillion. So for the first time, they are talking not in the $1 billion, they are talking in the $1 trillion that need to be plugged by 2035 for the developing countries to meet the Paris Climate Agreement ke targets. That means simply that if we have to achieve the Paris Climate Agreement ke targets, we have to mobilize the funding in order to close that funding gap. Lastly, this particular declaration and this particular outcome of the summit also highlights that the country are facing severe debt crisis. Now, when you are taking loan, the loan can be taken for developmental projects also. Loan can be taken for the sustenance also, like paying the salaries, paying the pension. And loan can also be taken for certain new initiatives, let's say health, education. But what phenomena has been observed with respect to the African countries, that there is issue regarding the public debt that is being created, and every year when you have to service that particular debt, servicing means you have to give the money as the repayment of that particular loan, interest repayment, that is very, very high. So jo paisa, the amount that should have gone otherwise to health, otherwise to education, now that is going in the servicing of that particular debt, that is major issue. So the public debt is roughly $1.8 trillion and the annual servicing cost is $163 billion. That means roughly you can assume that 10% of the entire loan amount is every year going on in the repayment. That means first, the loan cost was very, very high. Secondly, the health and education are now going to get suffer. Okay. So these are certain things that came out as the outcome of this particular summit. Now, India as one of the major leader as far as the global south is concerned, India has also paved the way for multiple important initiatives as far as this particular outcome is concerned. The first in this is the Global Traditional Knowledge Repository. So there is already a TKDL, which is the Traditional Knowledge Depository Limited of India, that uske basis par there is Global Traditional Knowledge Repository that has been suggested. That means utilizing the traditional knowledge, utilizing the knowledge of generation in order to make the future more sustainable. That's what is being talked about over here. So wisdom of humanity to benefit the future generations, unsustainable practices ko curb karna, and in order to improve upon the sustainability is the very important motto of this Global Traditional Knowledge Repository. Next is regarding the African skills multiplier. That means there has to be the skills that need to be imparted to the demographic dividend. Agar demographic dividend tabhi banega when the youth will be having skills. If they are not having skills, they will be eventually burdened, right? And that's why the Africa skill multiplier has been emphasized upon. We're creating the pool of 1 million certified trainers for skilling the youth in Africa. So the skill development will be done first for the trainer, and then they will be able to train the youth in Africa in order to develop the demographic dividend. Next is Global Healthcare Response Team. So now G20 mein majority of the countries are either the middle income countries or the high income countries. So they are at the better position in order to lead the world, and specifically in that those countries which are focusing upon the global south, those countries can lead or pave the way for the betterment of the global south. So here they have talked about the Global Healthcare Response Team, jahan par the healthcare experts will be identified and created as a pool of the G20 healthcare expert, and then that particular pool of experts will be deployed at different parts of the world in order to deal with the situations like pandemic or the epidemic situation, in order to deal with that particular situation in a proper manner and providing the early responses. Next is the open satellite data partnership. So as these countries are comparatively more developed as far as the technology is concerned, the countries like India, the countries like US, the countries of the European Union, the countries like China, they can share the satellite data. So these particular space agencies from the G20, their satellite data specifically pertaining to the agriculture, fisheries and the disaster management can be helpful for different countries of the developing and the least developed world. And that is going to help them in order to improve the yield, improve the agriculture, and that is eventually going to help them with respect to the sustainable practices. Next is regarding the critical mineral circularity initiative. So see, critical mineral ko, if you want to extract, that particular process is the mining, right? Now, in order to extract those particular mineral, you have to spend the resources, you have to do the environmental damage also, then the processing of that. All these are costly exercise, but at the same time polluting the environment. Already the large amount of critical mineral is there in the form of your and my mobile phones, right? The laptops, a lot of electronic devices, the batteries and all, right? So if we are utilizing the end of the life products, if we are recycling them properly, we will be doing two things. First, there will not be need for much primary resources from the mining. Secondly, that there are certain countries, for example, countries like the China, the countries which are preventing the access of those particular things to the rest of the world, creating the monopoly of these, that can also be reduced. So here the fostering recycling, urban mining, second life battery projects, innovation, all these things can be ensured. Along with that, we can make the global governance comparatively smooth. Last is the initiative on countering the drug terror nexus. So there is already a drug terror nexus. The drug trafficking is propagating the terrorism, and that particular thing is also causing a lot of issues with respect to the global system. So there is a need for breaking the drug terror economy in order to prevent the money laundering, in order to ensure the sustainable society. Now, another important thing that came out as the outcome of this particular G20 summit is Australia, Canada, India Technology and Innovation, ACITI partnership. Now see, you are already getting surprised that Canada and India, roughly one and a half year before this, they were having certain issues in between them, right? But now the relationship has to be improved in order to provide more yield, more support to the global governance, and that's why they are now talking about the technology and the innovation initiative. So what all these are including is, apart from the diversifying supply chain for the critical mineral, because see, we know that the China is having virtual monopoly of the rare earth element. When China is having virtual monopoly of the rare earth element, now the China can do the arm twisting tactics. The China can reduce the supply, and that's where the role of these particular countries like the Canada and Australia comes, that these are having the large amount of resources for the minerals like lithium, cobalt, etc. And these particular minerals, along with mixing India's technological capabilities and India's processing capabilities, can ensure the better availability of the critical and the rare earth elements. Apart from that, there is artificial intelligence, which is also growing at the large amount of speed, and in that also, if the AI is getting adopted without considering ethics, without considering the human aspect of that, then this particular thing is going to impact the large amount of lives. It is also being stated that every year roughly millions of jobs are going to get replaced. So there is a need to mass adoption of AI, but with the safety standards, including the inclusivity, including the transparency, including the accountability, so that there should not be any one or two powers which are controlling the entire AI network, including the data, right? So mass adoption of AI and the deploying of safety standards is very, very important. Lastly is the joint research and the commercialization of the clean energy technologies, because see, if we want to reduce the greenhouse gases, if we want to develop the technology, if we want to improve the scenarios, there is a need to ensure the technological sharing. So the joint research and the commercialization of the clean energy technology is also very, very important in order to help the least developed and the developing countries in order to reduce the utilization of the greenhouse gases. Now, all of this is not good. There are also certain issues that right now G20 is facing as a group, and certain individual countries which are preventing the path of G20 also. So the first important issue with respect to G20 is the representational inequity. So right now in 2023, there has been inclusion of the African Union. It should have become G21, but the reluctance is there that it is G20 only. That means to some extent there is a hesitancy from the perspective of certain countries that do not want to enlarge the scope of this organization. That shows the colonial mindset of certain countries. Next is about the diplomatic fragmentation. Now you see, every time in every summit there are certain prominent leaders that are missing. For example, from the side of China, from the side of Russia, from the side of different other countries, the major leadership were missing. Even from the side of United States, the major delegation was also missing, right? So in that particular case, this ensures the derailment of the initiatives that are going on, and that causes the diplomatic fragmentation, because kahin na kahin consensus emerge nahi ho pata aise case mein. Next is the unrealized goal of the global governance overhaul. So there are a lot of reforms which are pending. The IMF, the World Bank, the UNSC, entire UN system. We have in the last article, we have talked about the UN at the rate 80 initiative. So in order to ensure all these things, there is a need to ensure sustainable organization. And if there is issues pertaining to these organizations, if the reforms which are keep on pending, these are not being realized, in that case, the people's trust over these particular organizations is going to get reduced. Talking about the structural and the operational weakness, now the one of the prominent problem that is including this organization is the decisions which are taken, though they are the milestone decisions, but they are not binding. These countries are not at all bound to be the charter which has not charter but specific outcome that is there. And apart from that, the charter is also missing. So there is no such formal charter. Agenda kya hai, what will be the outcome, how the things has to take place, right? All these charter are also missing. Entire thing is depending upon the Troika. That means it is easy to destruct the formal nature of this particular organization. Next is about competition, because already there are a lot of competitive organizations. For example, there is BRICS representing the voice of Global South, that is also expanding. There is SCO, which is also including certain countries of the Global South and mainly focusing upon the Eurasian region, that is also expanding. So basically these groups are expanding, that is at the cost of G20. And then there are divided opportunities and the divided participation of the countries selectively in these particular forums. Lastly, talking about the geopolitical tensions and recent US boycott, that also sends the message that all is not good with this particular organization, and still this organization lacks the support of all the powers equally. Now, what should we do in these particular cases? Because these are the weaknesses. So there should be effective enhancement of the global role that has to be played by the G20. For example, there is a need for the permanent secretariat. There should be a place jahan par diplomats should sit, and they should chalk out ki what should be the priority areas, what should be the key work areas, and what should be the agenda for the upcoming G20 summit. It should not be rested only upon the country which is going to host, or the Troika, which is the group of 3 countries, but there should be a permanent secretariat which will ensure the continuity in the policies. Next is empowering the middle income countries. So ensuring empowerment of the middle income countries, like after Indonesia, it was India, India ke baad Brazil, Brazil ke baad South Africa. That reflects the changing nature of G20, and that is a good sign that the countries coming from the low and the middle income countries are reflecting the global governance related framework. But at the same time, these countries also should deserve their rightful place at the global governance manner. Accountability framework also should be there. So there should be a legally bound nature of the outcomes of the summit of G20, which ensures to some extent seriousness of the countries which are taking participation. Next is the strategic coordination with the UN agencies. So UNSC, World Bank, IMF, many other organizations, there should be incorporation of the cooperation and coordination. And lastly, there are certain things which are specifically important from the perspective of Global South, whether it is AI, whether it is cyber security, whether it is digitization. So all these things has to be incorporated in order to ensure the sustainable global framework. Apart from this, finally, there is a need for a charter which will clearly lay down, and along with secretariat, charter is also equally important, which will give an idea regarding the agenda and the continuity in the works of the G20, right? So with this, we have completed the entire discussion of the important topic of G20, which is very, very important for this year's exam perspective, and in general also from the perspective of the GS paper 2, which is the international relation, and there also the important global institution and the regional frameworks. So I hope whatever we have discussed and the applicability that we have talked about is clear to you. We will meet again in the next set of discussion with very important topic, which is regarding the India-Russia relation. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.